I just finished what should have been my most powerful SFF build yet. RTX 5080 Ryzen 7800 X3D in this premium case. Everything looked perfect until I actually tried to use it, and that's when things got really interesting. I was scrolling through Reddit when I came across this case, the Nanoq S by Thorzone. It's this solid block of CNC'd aluminum that honestly just looks incredible. But what caught my attention were these bigger cutouts that gives it a unique look. Now, I wanted to know how the RTX 5080 would actually perform mainly in a gaming build and also for video editing and some creative tasks as well. Because here's the thing, the 5080 is a beast, but SFF cases can sometimes be challenging. So the question became, what would the temps and performance look like in this case? Looking at this unibody shell, I like that it has interesting details like these customizable front panels, additional case handles if you like your PC vertical, subtle concave edges, and bigger cutouts that makes it look like a piece of art. Because it's one solid piece of extruded aluminum, there are no mismatches with the quality of this case. Just one unibody shell, no panels. Which also means that removing the shell is absolutely toolless. Just push down these two panels and slide off the shell, or just pull out the internal frame. By the way, the Nanoq S has a unique locking mechanism that works like a latch system, and I tested to see if I could accidentally slide off the shell, and thankfully, no, it's properly locked. Before we dive into the parts for this build, I want to point this out. The more I slid the unibody shell on and off during the build process, the more obvious it became that the friction tape in the corners of the shell might not hold up long term. I mean, mine already started to wrinkle, especially at the bottom ends when sliding the shell over the PC frame. I get that the friction tape helps to prevent or reduce any clanking or unpleasant sounds from metal-on-metal contact, which is important, but I'm just not convinced that this is the best solution. While this frame looks minimal, taking a closer look, it's the same familiar sandwich layout with the GPU on one side and the motherboard and power supply unit on the other. Speaking of sandwich layout, you can adjust the interior spacing to leave more room for your GPU because the GPU clearance here ranges between 2 to 4 slots, or create more room for your motherboard area with the CPU cooler heights ranging between 51mm up to 91mm if you intend to use a slightly taller CPU cooler. I actually prefer the interior adjustment here a lot more than in cases like the Fractal Terra because it's easier to shift the spine more accurately. Building in this case is slightly different. You actually start with the GPU because of this locking plate that's impossible to fit once the motherboard's in place. For the GPU, this MSI Ventus RTX 5080 caught my eye with its clean silver and black aesthetic, even though it's not the most premium feeling GPU compared to say a Founders Edition or the Asus Astral GPU versions because, well, this casing on the front is mostly high quality molded plastic. But it is a dual slot card, which makes building with it in small compact PCs so much easier. Like I mentioned earlier, this is mainly a gaming build first, but I still want to be able to handle creative workflows like video editing as well. So I went with the Ryzen 7800 X3D, which is an excellent gaming CPU and handles 4K video rendering in Premiere Pro beautifully. I chose the MSI B650i motherboard specifically for its low-profile heatsinks, which will make it easier to pair this motherboard with a low-profile CPU cooler. I went with this 1TB SSD and 64GB Kingston Fury low-profile DDR5 RAM sticks, so there's more than enough memory space for multitasking among other things. Also, I've honestly been enjoying these type of low-profile RAM sticks for my mini ITX builds because I never want to worry about CPU cooler clearance. The ID Cooling 55mm cooler fits perfectly here as well. Now, we'll install the motherboard on the other side. Then the power supply unit, Corsair 850W, mounted away from the GPU for better airflow. I'm also not using any custom cables and didn't struggle much with cable management, so if you don't have any custom cables, you'll be fine. Finally, I added two Arctic P12s at the top for exhaust. I wanted to try a front intake fan, but there weren't any mounting points for this. Maybe something Thorzone could consider for future revisions. The build itself went surprisingly smooth and was really satisfying. Everything fit perfectly, and honestly, I was feeling pretty confident. First boot, clean. Everything detecting properly. I installed Windows and all the drivers needed. That was where things really went bad. I would get stutters, black screens, even the blue screen of death. At first, I thought it was the hardware. Maybe the PSU wasn't enough, maybe something got damaged during shipping, but then I noticed something. With the AMD integrated graphics, everything was perfect. It was the RTX 5080 drivers. But here's where it gets weird. This wasn't a simple driver issue. I spent the next day testing every driver version I could find. Some were better, some were worse, but none were stable. Then I found this specific version that seemed promising, but installing it normally still didn't work. That's when I realized that it just wasn't about the driver, it was about something deeper. Turns out it was a combination of three things that had to be exactly right. So here's the fix that worked for me. First, boot into safe mode, and then use DDU to completely remove any Nvidia drivers. Then, and this is crucial, boot into the BIOS and make sure that you're on the latest version. If not, update it first. Next, if you're on a Gen 4 motherboard like I am, change your PCIe Gen switch settings from auto to Gen 4. Then install this specific driver version. I found this to be the most stable version after testing a couple of drivers directly from the Nvidia website. I also did not install the Nvidia app as well, and yeah, this completely solved all the problems I mentioned earlier. Once I got past the driver issues, this PC absolutely delivered. And speaking of delivering, I've been testing this build on the Asus ROG Swift PG27 AQDP, which honestly might be the perfect match for a build like this for those twitchy FPS games. 480Hz at 1440p, and I know that sounds excessive, but with this RTX 5080 pushing these frame rates, you actually start to feel the difference. The OLED panel makes everything pop, and this matte coating actually works. No more adjusting my blinds every single time I want to game. I was really happy with how well this PC was holding up while gaming. The GPU and CPU temps looked really good as well. For size reference, the Nanoq S is almost identical to my Form DT1, just slightly longer and wider. It's, however, smaller than the Lian Li Dan A4H2A case I built in months ago. This case really is something special. It's genuinely one of the most premium feeling cases I've built in. The build quality is exceptional, and if you want it standing vertically, those case stands are a nice touch. Just make sure you grab an angled power cable to protect your connections. But here's the thing. This case is quite expensive at 319 euros for the smaller S variant and 364 euros for the larger R variant. Look, I know that SFF parts are sometimes a little more expensive, and one look at this case, it's easy to say that this is one of those impressive looking cases built with precision that's honestly really unique in terms of its design. But 319 euros is a lot of money, especially when cases like the Form DT1 exist at more accessible prices. Sitting at my desk, this thing genuinely looks like a piece of industrial design, and the performance backs it up. The RTX 5080 absolutely shines in here, thermals are better than expected, and once you get past the driver quirks, which, let's be honest, aren't actually the case's fault, this PC just works. But I think there's something bigger happening in the SFF space where we're seeing this split between cases that prioritize value and cases that prioritize experience. The Form DT1, the Dan A4H2O, they're incredible, but they're tools. This feels more like a statement. And maybe that's okay, maybe there's room for both. Look, if you're building in the Nanoq S, just know what you're getting into. You're paying for premium materials, unique design, and honestly, a bit of exclusivity. It's not the practical choice, it's the choice for when you want your PC to be more of a statement piece. If you want a PC that looks like a piece of art on your desk, well, this one's right up there.